guest today is a beautiful concert violinist, but her story of faith is one she says demonstrates that God can turn lemons into lemonade in anyone's life. Welcome, Sophie, to 100 Huntley Street.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So you have a beautiful family, 3 beautiful children, a husband, and so your life sounds and seems beautiful.
Very blessed.
Yeah. But when you arrived to Canada about 8 years ago from Australia, you had a different plan. You were set to marry somebody else.
That's right.
Tell me about this.
Yes. Well, I think it took me a really long time to realize that God has His plan and just to be still and listen. But yeah, I was set to marry somebody else, and actually before. I never questioned my plan. I always thought I had the right plan. And I was 2 weeks out from moving to Canada and getting married, and I was driving to a performance, and I was overcome with emotion. And to make light of it, I had a moment where I thought, maybe I had a hormonal disturbance, and I stopped by the side of the road, and I looked up, and I happened to be, I was in Sydney, Australia. I'm driving down the coast, and I happened to stop in front of a church that had a sign. They often have signs out the front to welcome people. And it said on the sign, "Stop the path that you are on and reconsider."
Wow.
Yeah. And then underneath that had some other things. But I sat there and I thought, well, there's a reason I stopped here. But I was so certain that my plan was the best plan, that I actually thought, I prayed and said, "Lord, am I not supposed to be a violinist anymore?" I didn't actually think that I'm 2 weeks away from marrying somebody. It didn't even cross my mind that it could be that
relationship.
Yes.
That He was trying to give you a sign.
Yes, yes. So I moved to Canada and we did get married, and things disintegrated pretty quickly.
You were only married for
11 months.
11 months. And describe those 11 months. What was life like?
During that time, I was really disheartened. I spent a lot of the time, kind of shocked, certain things that were going on, and just wondering why this was happening. But when I was a teenager, when things went wrong, I used to get angry at God. I never questioned His existence, but I remember when a friend of mine passed away, I remember actually standing on the shore. We had a day at the beach. There was no waves, and I was grieving. I wasn't handling it very well. I must have been about 17. And I stood in the water and I yelled at God, because everyone had gone in and it was getting dark, but I'd sort of just stayed out there. And I remember yelling, "You're pathetic, even your waves are pathetic," And I turned around to walk back in. Out of nowhere, this massive wave knocked me over. Wow. And I was in the sand, spitting up salt water. And I think I just said something like, "Okay, fine."
Maybe your waves are better.
Yeah. So at this time in the marriage, I didn't want to go back to the sort of behavior that, that time that I had, and those emotions that I had thrown at God. But I was wondering why. And the marriage broke up, and I remained in Canada, and I had a deal to do 2 albums. So I stayed to do them, and I had planned to move home. But I kept on, why am I here? Why did I come here for this? And this is why I say that, in any situation, God can take lemons and make lemonade. It's the best. He can take anyone's life and change it.
And you had gone through a lot. I think you're skimming over some of, you went through a lot in this marriage. You talked about heartbreak and pain and post-traumatic stress. It wasn't an easy relationship.
No.
So seeking freedom from that and just even rediscovering yourself would have been a process.
Yes. Rediscovering myself for sure was a big process for me. and learning to trust God. So even though that was really tough for me, it was probably the first time in my life that I really reached out to him and really relied upon him. Because there were nights where I just felt so sad, but instead of blaming him, I asked him to comfort me, and he did. It was the first time that I had all this knowledge of God, and I had always gone to church, but I had my view of myself, because things hadn't gone in my life the way I thought, you know, the perfect Christian woman, you know, I had never really seen a lot of forgiveness growing up. I never really witnessed that. And so to really feel it for the first time was amazing. And someone told me during this time, just God's grace is enough.
Yeah.
Just fall into his arms. Yeah. And my first reaction was, how do I do that? And they said, be still. You know, less talking, less asking him for things, just be still and feel his presence. And it took me some time. But then
There's a happy ending.
Yes. Well, this person that was telling me that I needed to fall into the arms of Jesus, she was huge in my life. And she encouraged me. And then one day she said, Sophie, I have to introduce you to someone. He's a spectacular man, and he is the reason you came to Canada. And I said, okay, crazy lady, I think I'm done in that department. Yeah. But she persisted, and she actually tricked us into meeting each other. But when we did meet, we hit it off. And he told me within 2 weeks he wanted to get married.
Wow.
We waited a lot longer, but here we are. You know, I make fun of my friend and say, this crazy lady, but you know, here we are, 7 years later, married with 3 children. It was a long process, and you know, we both share the faith, we both live it. He's from a Catholic background, so getting married in the Catholic Church was a long process, but we did it.
And Sophie, what did you talked about grace. And I think, you know, as you go through this journey and realize, I think we've all realized that our plans are never as great as God's plans, but he doesn't hold that against us, especially when we don't listen to, you know, his signs. And you had a big sign, but he doesn't hold that against us. This Christmas season, as we think about the grace of Jesus, we think of him being born to this world. What have you learned about your father through that journey?
Well, the biggest thing is that whatever we think we can't face, do we not think that his understanding and his plan is just so much greater than we could even comprehend? You know, the way we would solve our problems, the way that we would plan something. I mean, you know, I think it's a daily battle for most of us. I think that he understands our nature. Yeah. You know, it's a daily thing. Yeah. Just remembering to put your journey in his hands and just trusting when you can't see what the answer is going to be, you know, that he can, you know, and that's the biggest thing to remember. And then there's a huge amount of peace. There's real peace, I should say, in that.
And you're seeing that today. Well, thank you so much, Sophie. We're going to hear some of your music later on in the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You know, I love what Sophie said about grace. And remembering that God shows grace to us every single day. And I hope you're reminded of that. Maybe you've made mistakes in your life. Maybe you've ignored some of God's signs. I know I have. But God is so graceful. He is our Heavenly Father. He knows every part of your being. He knows you desperately and deeply and intimately. And he loves you. He loves us. Besides our mistakes, besides the things we choose to do and choose not to do, he sees past that because he sees you as his child. And if you need to be reminded of that, if you need to be prayed for today, call our prayer lines, 1-866-273-4444, or email prayer@crossroads.ca. Again, amazing people who have lived life, who have made some mistakes as well, and can journey with you through prayer and remind you that you are still loved today and every day. Stay with us. We'll be right back.